What's up, folks? So here we are, episode 28. And of course, if you're not seeing us on Facebook, the transition has been made over to YouTube. So if you're looking for us, click on the link that I sent earlier on there. Of course, you can join us here on YouTube and Twitter, along with Twitch itself. So normally, of course, we're talking about the Eagles season. Unfortunately, the Eagles season is done. We've talked about it, and I think at nauseum at this point of what went wrong with the Eagles. So now we turn our focus into the AFC and NFC playoff picture, which should be good games on tap here. As we take a look at the playoffs being here, you have Indy and Buffalo, the early game at 1 o'clock. Then you have the 4:40 game between the Rams and Seahawks. Then finally, the 8 o'clock game between the Bucks and DCU. So you got good games lined up for today. Of course, more games lined up for tomorrow. So with that, of course, we have Bill Ofstad from the Seahawks Playbook podcast, along with Crystal, NFL writer for The Buzz, and Adam Bittner from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And he will be breaking down the Steelers game. So we got a good show for you guys for the next hour or so. And with that being said, we're going to get the show underway. And of course, I can't do it with the two other guys that we'll see on the flip side. So I am Angel. This is Broad Street South Sports Talk. And of course, I can't do the show without the wild man himself, the one, the only, Mike Fuji. Fuji, what do you say? What do you hear? How's it going?
Wild card Saturday, 3 games today. Should be very exciting. First time we have 3 wild cards today and 3 tomorrow with the extra wild card spot. So I think we're going to see some great football today. How about you, Angel? How are you?
I think so. I think it's been a long time coming for the teams that we're in here right now. The Bills, of course, they haven't seen any kind of victory since 1995. We know they went to the Super Bowl 4 years in a row, won the AFC Championship 4 years in a row, and lost them all. So maybe this is the year they finally get it turned around. So it should be quite interesting. I see the comments coming in. We're going to get to here shortly. And, of course, we also can't do the show without our sports contributor, the guru himself, Mike Sherman. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. To the viewers out there and to Angel and Mike, does anybody like chalk? Seriously, tell me, does anybody like chalk? Because this is going to be a wild card weekend, and I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be great. And there are definitely some upsets in the making. I can't wait to discuss them with everybody.
Well, we have a couple of guests, as we mentioned today. One is Bill Ofstad, who's, of course, we had him on earlier this season. We love and appreciate it. He came back to speak with us from the Seahawks Playbook podcast. We have Bill. If you guys don't follow him on Twitter, please give him a follow. Even if you aren't a Seahawks fan, as we talked about beforehand, the knowledge that he has will maybe convert at least your thought process on how well Russell Wilson and that group is doing. So, and we expect probably big things coming out of Seahawks group. So that is, of course, one of our guests, Adam Bittner, the second guest that was also on with us earlier this season. Again, anything that you want to know about Penn State, yet alone the Steelers, Adam Bittner is your guy. And again, you can see him on his Twitter website here, or Twitter handle, FujiMaster24, which kind of ironic with our own Fuji here, but FujiMaster24. Also, we have from The Buzz, NFL writer Crystal, which you don't see a picture of her, but you'll be seeing her here momentarily. So we have Crystal on there as well. And we may also have someone here later on from DCU, from CouchCoachLive.com. But with all that being said, let me take away, of course, all the other pictures that we see here. And we'll bring on, first on, Bill. Bill, how are you?
Hey, how you doing, guys? Angel, Mike, Michael,
Doing,
nice to see you again.
Fantastic.
Glad to be
Welcome
here.
to the show.
Thank you for coming on. We do appreciate it, of course. Next up, we have the lady herself, Crystal Page, from the NFL writer on The Buzz. Crystal, how are you? Thank you for joining the show today.
Hi, gentlemen. Great to be here. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for coming on.
How are you?
I'm great. We're good morning. It's freezing cold here in Tampa, but other than that, I'm good.
Which is ironic. Usually this time last year, it wasn't as cold, but this year, for some reason in Tampa, it's definitely colder than usual. And of course, we have Adam Bittner from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Adam, how are you?
Hey everybody, good to be back. Excited to talk some ball.
So we got, of course, we know that we have the wild card games today. One, of course, the early round, which is the Colts and Bills. And I'm going to get to the comments here very momentarily. We see that the Bills have yet to win, obviously, a playoff game since 1995, since Jim Kelly was our quarterback. It's how far back we have to go back when it comes to the Bills. Can the Bills, and of course, none of us being Bills fans, which is just fine, can the Bills find a way to beat the Colts? And I guess I'll start out with you, Fuji.
Oh, I mean, right now, I think the Bills are probably the hottest team right now in the NFL. I know Cole Beasley and Stephon Diggs were questionable today. But then on the flip side of it, I don't think the Colts are really getting any respect, just because of Phillip Rivers having a lot of experience in the NFL with playoff games. Seems more like a joke artist, but I like to see the Bills win today, but I may lean towards the Colts just as, a hot topic today to be the team to knock off Bills Mafia. Because like I said, I'd like to see the Bills win today, but I just don't think the Colts are really getting any respect.
Okay, fair enough.
I think the Buffalo Bills, outside of that loss in Arizona where the Hail Mary was thrown to DeAndre Hopkins, I think had they won that game, they'd be riding a 10-game winning streak. This Bills team is a juggernaut. They are a high-powered offense. I think that it's going to be really exciting to see the Bills, in the playoffs at home, right? Remember last year they lost a heartbreaking game to the Texans in overtime on the road. I think the stakes are going to be a little bit different this year. Taking the Colts out of their element, playing inside a dome, going up to cold Buffalo, I think that they'll struggle a little bit. And I look for the Bills to win this game rather easily. Not putting them in the Super Bowl yet, but I think that the Bills find a way to win this game and win it pretty easily.
Right. Adam, what do you think?
I like Buffalo too. I think having seen in Pittsburgh, we've seen them, both of these teams in the latter portions of the season. I think Buffalo really knew how to defend the Steelers' short passing attack. And I think at this stage of his career, Phillip Rivers kind of profiles similarly to Ben Roethlisberger, just because they're both older guys. Some of those physical skills have diminished. They have been relying kind of, I think Indy's more geared toward the run than the Steelers are, certainly. But again, these are not, let it rip types of teams. I think the Steelers and Indy, even though they don't have the same offense, they're trying to keep it somewhat underneath, and I think that kind of plays into what this Bills defense can do well. I think we're going to see maybe a similar game to what we saw when the Steelers and Bills played, a few weeks back.
All right, Crystal?
So I'm actually going to go with the Colts for this one. And I think the deal breaker for them is going to be their rookie running back, Jonathan Taylor. I mean, he's been phenomenal the last couple weeks. And if they can control the ball and keep Josh Allen off the field and control that clock, I think the Colts are going to come out on top on this one. I think it's going to be a close game. Maybe by 7 points, maybe even by less than that, maybe a field goal. But I think the Colts are going to upset the Bills in this one.
Right. Bill?
I got to go with the Bills on this one. They faced the Seahawks earlier in the year, so I was able to see them firsthand. I think they probably gave the Seahawks the toughest matchup of the year. Of course, in the beginning of the year, our offense was pretty good, and our defense was kind of lagging behind. Those roles have kind of switched later in the year. It'd be interesting to see that matchup now, but at the time, Buffalo was able to do what they wanted to do against the Seahawks defense. I would imagine that probably changes a little bit moving forward. But Seattle on offense just wasn't able to get it done, had a slow start against them, ended up losing, allowing 44 points, I think, to the Bills. And I don't see Indianapolis able to slow them down on offense. And then on defense, I think the Bills just have enough. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me to see the Bills end up in the big dance this year, just because I think Josh Allen's having a great year. Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, that tandem, and they're just able to move the ball.
All right, and I have to agree as well. For me, it'd have to be the Bills, and I think for the same reason, Josh Allen's having a big year. You look at Stephon Diggs, who, I guess people thought as he came over to the Bills that he would be that same kind of untalented player from Minnesota, and he was going to create all kinds of grief for this team. He didn't. He's learned a lot. Obviously, the Bills fans have loved to appreciate him, what he's done for the team so far. So for me, it's the same way. I think the Bills end up, beating the Colts this week. As Sherman talked about it as well, I think the cold factor, even though it doesn't play well in Philly anymore, but in New York, it's a whole different thing, being way up there in the Catskill Mountains. So for me, it's the Bills, I believe, that also win this game as well. And of course, the next game would be the Rams and the Seahawks, which is going to be, I think, the bigger game of the weekend. So with that, of course, we don't want to see the Seahawks being the last out, but by chance, if you happen to be last out, we'll reach out to lastoutmedia.com. On the spin will be lastoutmedia.com is a podcast studio for the creative community, meaning that if you are a podcaster, you want to become a podcaster, if you want to sharpen your skills a little bit more, if you want someone to coach you like John Barchard and or Vince Quinn, John William Crane, reach out to those guys at lastoutmedia.com. They have different segments and different prices for you to even have a voiceover talk. So if you need voiceover work, reach out to lastoutmedia.com. We're always here for you, lastoutmedia.com. So, of course, the bigger one today would be in the Seahawks. And I think this game for the Seahawks, if they want to get back to where they were just a few years ago, winning a Super Bowl themselves and making up for that disastrous last Super Bowl talk that we talked about, Bill, of course, earlier this season, the defense would have to step up, I guess, a lot more than what they've already had during the regular season. So, Bill, I'll start with you. I want to get your take on what it's going to take for the Seahawks to actually pull this together.
Well, I think you nailed it there. This comes down to a defensive battle. When you look at the first half of the season for the Seahawks, their defense was atrocious, historically bad as a pass defense. They've since turned that completely around. In the last 8 games, the Seahawks have allowed the fewest points in the NFL. They are DVOA ranked number 1 over the last 8 games overall. They've increased their pass rush. I think they've finished 4th or 5th in sacks. They're 4th or 5th against defending the run. So the defense has actually really come on. Now, conversely, with the Rams, you're taking a look at the overall ranked number 1 defense in the NFL. So this is really going to be a defensive battle any way you cut it. It's just going to be a matter of who can score points and who can't. And I do not believe that the Rams are equipped to score a lot of points against the Seahawks. The 2 games we had this year, the difference in those games was actually turnovers. In the first game, the Seahawks had 3 turnovers. It was earlier in the season. Our defense wasn't quite coming together. The offense sputtered. And then in the second game, it was the Rams only being able to score 3 field goals in that game, and Seahawks were able to score 20, and that was enough. So I do imagine it's going to be a similar game to that second game. I do think that the Seahawks can probably put together one more drive and score another touchdown. I think it's going to be around 27 to 9 in this game.
Right. So
maybe 13 for the Rams, but I don't see many more points for them.
Crystal, I know because you're again an NFL writer for the Buzz, and also you go around the NFLs, but more specifically, I guess today we'll ask you a question as well. Russell Wilson, what can you expect from him today? Is it Russell Wilson of the past that we've seen? Because you do get a little bit slight variation from Russell, the regular season quarterback, to Russell, the playoff quarterback. So who do we see today, and why do you think he would have probably the better game that he's had all season long?
So part of what Russell's been kind of going through is he has been second guessing himself. And I think a big portion of why he's been second guessing himself is because we have not had our 5 offensive linemen start since we were undefeated. And this weekend is the first time that that's going to happen. I mean, this is only going to be the 6th time this season that they all 5 of them are going to play. And I think that's going to give Russell the confidence back that he needs to take his time and start making those right decisions, because that's really where he's kind of just been like all over the place, is that he's second guessing himself, and he doesn't need to, but I think it's because he doesn't feel protected right now. I mean, I think this is the most how many times has been sacked?
I think it was
it's
47
like,
times.
Yeah, I was going to say like 47 or 48. Way too many. And you start getting sacked that many times, you're going to hesitate. If you watch him closely, he'll step back and then he'll he's not going all the way through. So I think we're going to see a different offensive side. Our defense is, they're on fire right now. They are just humming away. I think they finally are clicking all together. We're back to all being healthy, which is huge. Jamal Adams is going to scare the crap out of golf if he plays, because that's how he hurt his thumb in the first place.
Right.
I think it's going to be very similar to what we saw 2 weeks ago. I think yes, is it going to be a defensive versus defensive game? Yes, but our offensive line is going to power out on this one.
I'm going to ask a question here, of course, to both, because Bill, obviously, we speaking with you earlier this season. When we spoke last, the Seahawks were heading in the right direction. And after speaking, as we followed you throughout the season as well with your podcast, is that we saw the kind of up and down a little bit of a roller coaster that it's been since we've spoken, and now leading into this game as well. What do you see, again, was one of those bigger differences in between how they start out hot, kind of flattened a little bit, and now have been able to, just like Crystal had mentioned, that it seems like the defensive squad has gelled a little bit more than as they start the season?
Well, I think in the early part of the season, Seattle started 5-0. I think they faced some defenses that they were able to take advantage of, especially with Russell Wilson being aggressive. I thought they came out aggressive, but when they faced a little bit more stiff competition, starting with Arizona on defense, Russell Wilson started turning the ball over. And I think that led Coach Pete Carroll, who's fairly conservative, to kind of constrain the offense a little bit, limit those turnovers, which in turn limited some of those explosive plays you saw earlier in the year to DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. They started running the ball a little bit more balance to the offense, and that kind of limited their opportunities to convert third downs and so forth. And so you saw the offense sputter just a little bit. Conversely, at the same time, that defense stepped up. Adams came in back from a little injury. Seahawks made a really profound midseason trade with Carlos Dunlap to add to that defensive line. At the time, Seattle was looking at being the lowest pass rush win rate in the NFL before Carlos Dunlap. Since that time, they've just been on a tear, been able to get to the quarterback with rushing 4, sometimes 5, drop another guy into coverage. So that's really helped the defense. And that's really turned the season around. Now, at the same time, the offense has really kind of been slowed down. Explosive plays have been lacking. I think they've only had 4 or 5 plays in the last 5 weeks that have gone over 20 yards. They just have not been able to move the ball down the field. Defenses have been playing too high safety, cover 2 against the Seahawks, and limiting their downfield opportunities. The good news for the Seahawks in this game that makes the big difference is that their running game is completely healthy. They've got Chris Carson. Carlos Hyde is back from being nicked up. Rashad Penny does have a little knee. He may not play, but Alex Collins showed in the last game that he can move the ball close to the goal line for the Seahawks and give them another dimension down there in the red zone. So everything seems to be coming together. I think Seahawks fans in general have now sort of believed in their defense, but they're still waiting for that offense, that early season offense to come back. If those two can come back together and be married in the playoffs, it's going to be pretty amazing.
Crystal?
Sorry, what was the question?
So looking at, of course, when you mentioned it beforehand, as far as the Seahawks starting out 5-0, and then we saw the up and down when it came down to the regular season. Now that we've seen just the same way as you mentioned, that the defense seems to be putting everything in the right place. What was the bigger difference between the start of the season now heading into the first game of the playoffs?
Again, I think it's just both our offensive line and our defensive players being healthy. Griffin was out for a month. That really slowed our defense down on the corner. And he's back and ready to go. Jamal Adams has been attacking and putting a ton of pressure on and getting those sacks. And like I said, this is the first time that our front five is going to be playing together since Arizona, because before that we were undefeated. When they all play together and they click, I don't think they're just a different team. Right. They're just a different team. The other thing that they're really strong at is when it comes down to it, they get it together and they do whatever they have to do to win. The only thing that scares me is the fact that we're predicted to win. And I feel like when everybody's like, oh, Seattle's going to win, Seattle's going to win, Seattle's going to win, Seattle's going to win, they tend to take that for granted, that the win should be automatic for them. And we can't let that happen this afternoon. We just can't. Right. We got to go and make those big plays that we haven't been making. Russell needs to feel protected, and I think that's going to happen. And I think we're going to be okay. I think we'll win this week, and see what happens next week for sure. But I think we'll be okay today, especially with that home field advantage. I mean, we've lost one game at home all season long without fans in the stadium. So
it's something else too, because great point you make there. It's the 12th man that everyone expects that, I guess, especially come playoff time, because it gets so loud there in Seattle. So it's there's been points made, I guess, from other networks are saying, the obviously the fan base stands behind you. If you're down, they contribute to obviously try and get the teams turned around. So it's going to be a complete different experience on how. And I would think that the Seahawks know it as well, that energy comes from them winning and tearing teams up from the fan base itself. So it's going to be really interesting to see this game. And that's why I think they're the highlighted game of the week. I know Tampa plays later on against DCU, which is the Washington football team, and they play them later on. I think Tampa will also take that victory as well. I don't think DCU has enough with Ron Rivera, but it'll be interesting to see. Adam, I'm going to go to you here for a second. So I'm going to say, let's say hypothetically, in the end, it's Pittsburgh versus the Seahawks. Would Ben and company have enough to win against the Seahawks?
That's really funny because I predicted that last night.
Oh wow!
I was going to say that'd be quite a Super Bowl rematch from 2005. Yeah.
I was like, I'm going way off the cusp on this one. Nobody's gonna think that this will happen, but this could happen.
Yeah, I know Seahawks fans would probably like another shot at the Steelers. After I think they're still not over some of those calls from that Super Bowl 40. I don't know how much faith I have in the Steelers at this point. I think they're going to win this weekend because I think they match up pretty well with this Browns team. They've controlled them, but again, especially with tough defenses, I feel like the Steelers' offense has kind of been figured out in a lot of ways. The short passing game worked a lot early on because it wasn't what other teams were used to seeing from the Steelers, and I think as the season's progressed, you've seen their scoring average go down because they haven't really been able to challenge defenses down the field. We saw a little bit of that in the second half against Indianapolis, before last week, which the Steelers weren't really playing to win last week because they had already pretty much locked up their spot in the playoffs. But before that, over the last month of the season, that second half against Indianapolis was the only time we really saw them successfully attack downfield. And so I think, when you run into some of these tougher defenses in the postseason, I think it's going to be tough for them, to compete. So I don't know what the point spread would be, but I think I would probably lean towards Seattle at this stage of the season.
Interesting. Good conversation for us. Good argument for either or. I think The one thing too, I guess we haven't seen is, and looking back at the lineup before I end up forgetting here on Wild Card Weekend, the Titans, which was a big one coming up for tomorrow. So they have a chip on their shoulder because last year when it came to the Ravens, of course, the Ravens were gone. They moved on from there, but then the stop was with the Chiefs. The Chiefs have been good throughout the season here. Of course, Andy let some guys rest at the end of the season going into their playoffs. Titans have been kind of one of those sleeper teams. Do the Titans maybe possibly post a challenge for both Pittsburgh if they, of course, pass the Ravens here? And, of course, if Pittsburgh moves on, is there almost an even kill when it comes to the Titans and Pittsburgh, Adam? Or do you feel still that Pittsburgh would be able to beat the Titans? I think he may.
Well, I think the Steelers beat a particular team early in the series to see how they will do adjust. Really because they were one of the teams that really was victimized by, when the short game was working at its zenith during the season. It's obvious to beat the same team in 1 year. I think it somewhat due to is Robert Spillane all the way back in the middle of that defense? He stepped in for Devin Bush actually in that Tennessee game early in the season, and really helped the Steelers shut down Derrick Henry. Kind of keep him from running wild on them. But then he's been dealing with some injuries late in the season. So, if they were a team that the Steelers saw next week, I think this week is particularly interesting to see. Is Robert Spillane at inside linebacker? Is he 100%? Can he anchor this run defense? And and I think Cleveland will be a good test in that regard because they've obviously had one of the best running games in the NFL as well with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And so this would be, I think, a great test to see where Spillane is. And I think if he looks good, and I think if the Steelers defense looks good, I would like the Steelers' chances in that game probably more than a lot of these other possible contenders.
So, Mike, you have a question?
Which my mayor, Mike?
You. I guess.
No, I mean, we're discussing Cleveland, Pittsburgh here, right?
Well, we can, or of course, the Seahawks Rams matchup.
Well, as far as Tennessee and Baltimore's not the same team they were last year. I mean, their defense played lights out. Everybody was putting them in the Super Bowl by probably 3/4 of the season, and I just think Derrick Henry he's unstoppable right now. The guy's just a battering ram, beating up defenses, manhandling one-on-one, with the strong arm. I think it'll be a close game, but I just don't think Baltimore's missing something this year.
Because you got to figure, too, they don't have the same MVP-type quarterback they had last year. Lamar Jackson, Tom brought her up here. Lamar doesn't seem to do well in the playoffs. And again, it could be leading from last year to this year. His game has not stepped up as much as it did last year. And the head coach, of course, Harbaugh, he said that he felt that Lamar was going to get better, but I think they still been on that cusp. They still haven't found the rhythm from last season. So I'll agree with you there. So, Sherman, I'd like to get your take of today's games, to see what and if the playoffs can do, or as far as Seahawks can do.
Well, yeah, I wanted to chime in on that Seahawks game. And Bill, you may recall that we talked about this when the Seahawks came to Philadelphia for the Monday night game, if I'm not mistaken. Are the Seahawks wearing those highlighter uniforms today? Because if I'm not mistaken, you told me that they are undefeated when they play with those highlighter uniforms.
Yeah.
I don't know. They may go Wolf Gray today for the playoffs, but honestly, I don't know yet.
So here's my analysis as somebody who is not sitting in the Pacific Northwest, right? I think that the Rams have nothing to lose in this game, and all of the pressure is on the Seattle Seahawks. Right now, they are statistically the better team. As Crystal said, they are favored. Russell Wilson, earlier in the season, we were talking about whether or not he was going to be the MVP. I believe, Bill, I asked you whether we thought Russell Wilson would get the 5,000 yards or not, and that didn't end up happening. With all that being said, Seattle is still clearly a good team. But if there's one team who knows the recipe for how to go into Seattle and win. It's the Los Angeles Rams. It's a team that has had their success in that stadium for the last couple of years outside of the loss that they had 20-9 a couple of weeks ago. And they're playing with a quarterback who is not their usual starter. And ever since the Rams made the Super Bowl, they didn't make the playoffs last year, and they just barely got into the playoffs this year. And I honestly think all the pressure is on the Seattle Seahawks. And when you talk about a team like the Rams who have the first pass defense and the third rush defense, it's going to be a low-scoring game, as Bill had talked about. And it really could come down to a turnover at the end of the game. And look, how many times have we seen Seattle on national TV where it comes down to a last fourth quarter drive with under 1 minute to go? And who knows? I think it's going to be really close. I honestly think that the Rams are going to find a way to pull this one out. I don't mean to rain on the parade of Crystal and Bill, who are Seattle fans.
Well, Michael, you are absolutely right that the Rams have had Seattle's number for the last 4 or 5 seasons. Absolutely, Seattle's been kind of resetting their offense and defense rosters during that time period. The Rams, up until this year, had fairly dynamic offenses in the top 5 in the NFL, especially their pass offense. This year, not so much. Their offense in general, points scored, is ranked 22nd in the NFL. That's the difference in this game, right? Rams come in with a high-powered offense plus this defense. Yeah, they're going to cause trouble, probably go really deep in the playoffs. The difference being now they don't. Seattle's defense is vastly improved. The Rams' offense is anemic at best. And I think that's the difference now. You mentioned turnovers. I think that's definitely a key. As far as the pressure goes, I think both teams have been here a lot. Seattle's been in the playoffs 8 out of the last 9 years. They don't lose at home very often. This is their first home playoff game in a few years, so they're going to be excited to get back there. The energy level that Dunlap and Adams bring to that defense, I think, really makes a huge difference in this game. And I'm not, you want to temper your excitement, and you don't want to be too much of a homer on the outlook. But it's hard for me to see a viable path, unless there's lots of turnovers in this game for the Seahawks, that the Rams score enough points to win this game.
Well, Mike went on Sherman here, went on a good little rant there when it came to the Seahawks, and it kind of felt bad for the both Seahawks fans here. But he makes a great point. You can't argue as far as on that behalf. Adam, I want to get to you here momentarily, because one thing I want to say is last year it felt like with Pittsburgh that Mike Tomlin was going to be on the hot seat. Then this year, of course, he turned it around. I mean, I don't think, truthfully, a lot of people expected for Pittsburgh to do as well as they did, obviously, to start off the season as well as they did. But then the good thing about Mike Tomlin, he will be honest, and he will say, as he did, as they were getting those lucky wins, the last 2 before they went on a 3-game losing streak. What has been, in your eyes, the big difference between last season Mike Tomlin to this season's Mike Tomlin?
I think last season was really a product of the quarterback being injured. I think, without having Ben Roethlisberger, even though he has been diminished this year in a lot of ways, he's still better than everything that the Steelers had. I think, Steelers fans love to talk about him being on the hot seat, but this is a franchise that's had 3 head coaches, for decades, between Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and Mike Tomlin. And I don't think, last year was really going to be the year that put Mike Tomlin really on that hot seat. I think getting Roethlisberger back this year and, having a good season was key for him, to kind of maybe secure his long-term future here and show that he wasn't really slipping. But I think, I think the quarterback is obviously the biggest difference that I see. But then again, on the other end, you've kind of seen this team slide late in the season now for, 3 years running, and who knows how much longer Ben Roethlisberger has. In a lot of ways, it feels like they're lucky that he's even at the level he is at right now. Looking toward next season, what does that mean? What does his continued, diminished physical skills mean for this team and for this offense? so there's pressure on this team to kind of get things done now, because you don't know really where this franchise is going. I think there's more uncertainty, at that most important position on the field than there's ever been. So I'm interested to see how this playoff run goes, how it is received. Simply because of all the uncertainty and because we've seen this team kind of falling back late in the season, 3 years in a row now. Even with the quarterback issues last year, the Steelers were contending for the playoffs and they had a December collapse. This year they did, finally manage to make the playoffs. And I think this Cleveland game is going to be really important because of the COVID issues. I think the Steelers are heavy favorites for a reason. And if they can, get to the game that they want to play and play well this week, I think they can maybe have the confidence to go through the next couple of rounds. But that all remains to be seen. So I think this playoff run is important for not just Mike Tomlin, but for the entire franchise, because really the whole strategy has been building toward having Roethlisberger in this position late in his career and seeing what he's able to do.
No, we do ask the hard questions around here. We have no shenanigans. We like to get to the point, even though we really don't ask the hard questions around here, but we try. And with the one thing I will say that's not hard, of course, is For the Bay Clothing Company. Their T-shirts, a soft quality brand, wash after wash. The design doesn't run off. So if you guys want great shirts, take a look at forthebayclothing.com or forthebayclothingco.com, and you will see all the outstanding shirts that they have. Great material. They also have Pilsner glasses. They have bracelets. They have always adding a new lineup along with the hats. So take a look at forthebayclothingcompany.com. So, Adam, of course, the one thing that was said, which we will talk about, kind of, I guess, a little harsh question here, but the one thing that was said about Pittsburgh when they played in Detroit, of course, the last Super Bowl appearance and one for Jerome Bettis, was that year the game was fixed, that Pittsburgh was supposed to win it, to send off Jerome Bettis into Detroit because we knew he was going into retirement to win. And this season, kind of full circle, came back around again, that it's been talked that once again, Pittsburgh is so-called the team to win it all this year because they want, it's fixed and rigged for Pittsburgh to win it. I don't see it that way. I would love to get your take on it because I think Pittsburgh has a long, hard run, at least fought road ahead in order to get back to where they were just a few years ago.
Yeah, that's true. I think if you're referring to that 2005 Super Bowl run, that was at the time, before the Giants did it, the toughest run any team had ever gone through in history, though, because they were the 6th seed and they beat the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd seeds in the AFC. And I believe Seattle was the 1st seed in the NFC that year. So, I can't imagine this road could possibly be tougher than the one they followed at the time. I think the reason that team was successful is because it had an identity of this lockdown stuff, the run defense, and an offense that was able to just score enough points to win. The 4 weeks before that, they'd had to kind of enter playoff mode because they needed to win all of those games just to get into the playoffs as the 6th seed. So they had been battle tested maybe more than some of those other teams. I think particularly about that Indianapolis game, where Indianapolis was coming off the bye and they were certainly the better team on paper, but the Steelers had just had their game rolling for weeks at that point, and Indianapolis was just kind of caught up in that buzzsaw. I'm not sure that this team has the same identity at this point. I think obviously this defense is opportunistic. It can force a lot of turnovers. It's a playmaking defense, and I think it has a lot of the same DNA as that 2005 Super Bowl team. Offensively, I don't think we really know where this team stands at this point, just because it looked great early in the season. It looked like it could be that offense that would score just enough points. Maybe it's not going to light up the scoreboard. It's not going to be the Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell era, chucking it deep Steelers with Ben Roethlisberger putting up 500-yard passing performances. But the short passing game was working. The weapons, Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, those guys just got to get the ball in their hands and let them, kind of cook, with yards after the catch. But teams kind of figured that out. So I think, it's important for the Steelers to kind of establish an identity early in this postseason if they're going to make a run again, because that's something that they've had in the past and that I'm not sure that they've really defined, at this point.
Before we move on to other things here, I just want to – so, Crystal, just to let you know, Joey B here. Joey B is a great contributor to the show, just like Tom Fogarty, Brian Neff. I mean, a lot of guys that we have. Joey B is he's like the wise guy of the show. So he
Hi,
loves
Joey.
So he's a very, very fun guy for sure. So, we have Pittsburgh has been, I think, probably the most interesting of the entire NFL season group, along with, I guess, with Seattle too, because Seattle, I think the early expectations were that the Seahawks should be at least in the playoffs. I didn't hear anything, and maybe because we're on the East Coast, but I never heard anything as far as the Seahawks being the contender for the Super Bowl. The early pick, and still as of right now, is between obviously KC and Pittsburgh. On the NFC side, to me, it's a major kind of toss up because it could be either the Seahawks and New Orleans. So I guess for Crystal, I will say, do you think if it comes out to the NFC Championship game, can the Seahawks beat the Saints and move on to another Super Bowl?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The Saints are awful in postseason. They like to exit themselves very early and make a statement. So we're strong in playoff. We're strong postseason. So I would be more concerned if we were going up against Green Bay next week versus the Saints. That would concern me more. But I think as far as if the Saints make it past today, we're going to take them out.
Okay, so Bill, I will piggyback on just what Crystal said here. So if it comes out then between the Packers, which would be a great matchup, don't get me wrong, for NFC Championship game, I think it would be fantastic. Green Bay, Seattle, who has a better edge?
I think Seattle needs to have its offense in the first 8 weeks of the season come on and play the same defense, and we win that game, no problem. I think if Seattle can't score against Green Bay, that's going to be an issue because Rodgers is going to score some points. That offense is going to score some points, even with Seattle's newly invigorated in the last 8 weeks, number 1 defense in the NFL. They're going to score some points. Here's where home field advantage matters. That game would be played at Lambeau Field in January.
Right.
So that's not anybody wants to go in there and do that. So you've got to be able to do that, overcome that. I think Seattle's positioned to kind of be able to have an offense that controls the ball, controls the clock against Green Bay with their running game. And then the defense, it comes down to generating turnovers, disrupting the timing with Rodgers and so forth. As far as the Saints go, I'd rather play the Saints, to be completely honest, just because it's an indoor stadium. And I think the Seahawks match up better against the Saints overall. And either game, I mean, you get to the NFC Championship game, you're giving yourself a chance. I'll take that all day.
As much as I hate chalk, I think the NFL wants to do whatever is possible to get the Super Bowl to be the Kansas City Chiefs and the Green Bay Packers. When you look at Mahomes and you look at Aaron Rodgers, MVP-type candidates, and kind of the two faces of the NFL right now, I know, Angel, you had talked about whether the NFL was trying to get Pittsburgh in there. I think that the NFL is going to do whatever they can to get Kansas City and Green Bay in that game. They're probably the two most popular teams in the NFL. They have Mahomes, they have Rodgers, and they're both MVP quality type candidates. And I think it's going to be very difficult to beat either one of those teams in the playoffs. And as much as I hate chalk, I think that it's really gearing up for a Kansas City Green Bay Super Bowl, which would really have tons of people viewed because of the fact that that was the very first Super Bowl.
Right. I have to agree. Fuji, I'm going to ask you this question because, of course, the third guest we were supposed to have on, unfortunately couldn't make it, and it could have been for their own reason. So later on, we're going to see the DCU team against the Buccaneers. So my question for you would be, does DCU and Ron Rivera have enough to beat the Bucs, or does Brady look like Brady did with the Patriots and find a way to win it against DCU?
I'd like to see Washington knock off Tampa Bay because, Washington's front four are all number 1 picks, and Brady gets frazzled when he gets knocked around. The flip side of it, Alex Smith, I take my hat off to him, but he it's pretty much contained. He can't run out of the pocket with, his leg. And I think Washington will bring the defense, but I don't think they really got the firepower to. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I could see Washington knocking off Tampa Bay, not by much, but hopefully it'll be time to put Brady out of the first round. But then again, I think it's going to be a defensive battle. Tampa Bay's coming up to some cold weather. We know a history about that, though. But I just don't. Some reason I just like to see Ron Rivera after what the poor man is going through with cancer. I take my hat off to him. I'm going to go Ron Rivera, ex-Eagles linebacker, ex-Eagles coach, played for Buddy Ryan, a disciple of Andy Reid. Just my take.
If you watch the first Rocky movie when Rocky fights Apollo on New Year's night in the Spectrum, after that first round, Apollo's manager says he doesn't think it's a show. He thinks it's a damn fight. Finish this bum and let's go home. And Washington, they're the hungry team here, just like the Rams-Seattle game. All the pressure's on Tampa Bay. Because if Tom Brady does not find a way to win this game, he's going to say 6 Super Bowl rings, it wasn't because of you. It was because of Belichick, wasn't it? So he needs to prove that he can do it. And there's a hungry team in Washington tonight, and they don't care that they were the winners of the NFC least at 7-9 or whatever their record was. They're going to bring their top-notch defense in that game tonight. And if they can rattle Tom Brady, as Fuji was talking about, this can be a really close game into the fourth quarter. Now, look, fourth quarter, who do you take, Tom Brady or Alex Smith? Yeah, I get it. You're going to go Tom Brady. But if Washington can find a way to break some runs, and I know that Tampa Bay has the first rushing defense in the NFL, I think that Washington can find a way to actually pull this out. And as much as we've joked about DCU this year, they don't even have a team name. Here they are. They're in the playoffs, and they could potentially win this game. And I have to think that if you're a Seattle fan, right? If you're a Seattle fan and things play out the way that they could potentially play out, if the Bears find a way to beat New Orleans tomorrow, and Chris will talk about New Orleans always finds a way to win the playoffs, you could potentially be talking about DCU traveling 3,000 miles all the way to Seattle next week. Let's see what happens. I'm taking DCU tonight to win the game on the field.
Yeah, just to piggyback off what Mike was saying, you got Chase Young putting bulletin board material up saying he's coming for Brady earlier in the week. So, that's going to stir up both teams and get that Tampa Bay offensive line fired up too. Didn't mean to call you off, Bill.
No problem. I think, if this game is a low-scoring game, it favors Washington. The Bucs got to travel there. It's going to be cold. Alex Smith, I think that story is a great story. Antonio Gibson, Terry McLaurin, who I really wanted the Seahawks to take in that draft. J.D. McKissick receiving out of the backfield. I think they can do just enough on offense to kind of put some points up and keep it close. But that defense for Washington, that was one of the stiffest defenses the Seahawks faced all season. And Tampa Bay is going to have their hands full on that game. And I love these defensive battles. The Seahawks, the Rams, I think the Washington and the Bucs, you mentioned the stopping the run first in the NFL. Man, that game, if it's a low scoring game, like in the teens, Washington's got a shot, and you mentioned Seattle, favorable matchups going forward in the playoffs, the Bears and the Saints. If the Bears can somehow get by the Saints there, or if the Seahawks can get by the Saints and the Bears beat Green Bay Packers down the road, Seattle could host an NFC Championship game. So anytime a lower seed team topples a higher seed team, except for my own game, I'm in favor of that.
And Chris, will just kind of give you a reason why we've called DCU because, of course, they went through a name change after the fallout with the Redskins and Dan Snyder, and that continues to evolve. So that's not done yet. Well, since they came up with the logo with the W, we figured it'd be more fitting to call them the District of Columbia University team instead of the actual Washington football team, and that's where we got DCU from.
At least you gave them a name. I just call them the team with no name. So That's about as far as I go with it. But I'm actually not very popular with all of my Tampa Bay fans down here, because I too think Washington is going to win this game. The Bucs just have not faced a defense like what Washington has, and Chris Young is going to not Chris Young. Sorry. Chase Young is going to be coming after Brady, and Brady hates having pressure on him. He hates it. He doesn't like to be touched. And he will throw the ball away, and he will start making mistakes if you start making him uncomfortable. And that's exactly what Washington is going to do.
Crystal, what do you think about Tom Brady's like quick release? I mean, he's got one of the quickest release passing games in the NFL to kind of counteract that.
It will make a difference if Mike Evans plays. I think that's going to make a huge difference. But from what I know, Mike Evans is not going to play, and I think that's going to be a real deal breaker for them, because Mike Evans is the only one that's really making those big long plays with Brady. Other than that, do they have a good run game? Are they finally clicking? And are they making the plays that they need to start winning games? Absolutely. But I also don't think that they're strong enough to really make a strong playoff run for it. And Brady is really the only one that has postseason
experience
out of the entire Buccaneers team, because they haven't been to the postseason since 2005, I think it was.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
So I just if Washington can come out strong, and they have to be able to control Brady, which I think that's going to happen. And they have to be able to put some points up. Their offense has to be able to put some points up on the board. Have to. But they've won games surely off of their defense. So it could happen. But I'm going with the team with no name on this one. And I think both storylines are really good. I think Alex Smith's storyline is phenomenal. And it's a cool thought process when you're here in Tampa to think about Tom Brady with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers playing in a Tampa Bay Super Bowl. That was I think that was a whole reason that he came down to Tampa in the first place.
And it's true, because it was talked about beforehand that he said his choice was that he at first was supposed to be LA. According to what Tom said, he wanted to go back to his roots. So he wanted to go back to LA, any of the teams that were out there. Then I guess a big push became for the Bucs and saying, hey, by the way, you can be the first quarterback not only to take the home team to the Super Bowl, but win it in your own hometown. So you're right as far as that behalf. Adam, I want to come back to you here for a second before we go off. Joey brought up a good point. He said, and Bill talked about this before we came on air. Have you heard any other updates as far as when it comes to COVID in relation to Cleveland and how much it'll affect them for the game?
I'm not. I actually just hopped right on here today, but I think the biggest question is how do you deal with half of your coaching staff being absent for a game? I think that's going to be Cleveland's biggest challenge, is just cohesiveness. And God knows that how many coaches in both the college and NFL seem to have problems with clock management and late game strategy just normally without having to deal with people being out. I think I think it's one of those elements you don't really talk about because the coaches are always on the field. Well, what happens when you don't have some of your coaches on the field? It's kind of like you're missing some of your generals. So I think that's why I like the Steelers in this game, regardless of which players are and are not missing. I think it's going to be hard for Cleveland to kind of overcome something that's fairly unprecedented, in NFL history, and what that means for the rest of the postseason. I'm not sure, but I think it's going to be interesting to watch that play out.
I've got enough.
Also, I
data
like
on that.
Washington. I like Washington, like everyone else on this panel. I think I'm a victim of a small sample size. I only watched them a couple of times, but they were, in those couple of weeks after Thanksgiving when they beat the snot out of Dallas, and then they came to Pittsburgh and gave Roethlisberger his first loss of the season. So they've looked like world beaters to me when I've watched them. So I'm right on that train with the rest of you guys.
I have to agree as far as, well, so DCU, I'm not by any means a fan of, but the Ron Rivera / Alex Smith story is definitely very intriguing. And of course, DCU had to let go of Dwayne Haskins, and maybe Dwayne will find another job with somebody next year. I mean, maybe he can go down to Jacksonville. That's the retirement home for the NFL, so maybe he can go down there for all we know. So that's the big story that I guess will be let off here as the offseason continues. And we got about 2 minutes before the show ends, so I want to get predictions as far as for tomorrow's games, because of course that would be for tomorrow. We already know how we feel. I think Tampa actually pulls away from DCU. I think DCU gets a hot start in the first half, but I think Tom Brady, what he works is magic from the second half. I think that's what I end up taking it, and I think they'll take it so much. It'll be a 45-21 win with the Bucs. So tomorrow, and I'll go round robin here. Ravens, Titans. Bill, I'll start with you.
I like the Titans, actually. I think the Ravens are a diminished team this year. We talked about that earlier in the year with Lamar Jackson kind of struggling as a playoff quarterback. The Titans with Henry at running back, AJ Brown wide receiver, their defense. I think they score enough to win that game.
Okay, Crystal.
I'm going with the Titans too, for the same exact reasons. I just don't think the Ravens are the same team that they were last year.
Right. Adam?
Toughest call of the week for me. I like both of these teams for different reasons. I think Tennessee is the closest to playing its best game. I think if you get the Ravens' best game, I think they're still that team that we saw last season. I think it's just a question of whether they can get to that gear. I don't think they can, so I'll slightly lean toward Tennessee as well.
All right. Sherman?
Titans. Baltimore had the opportunity to extract revenge for their playoff loss earlier in the year when Tennessee strolled into Baltimore. And I went on this show and said that Baltimore would obliterate the Titans, and I was wrong. So you know what? I'm going to go with the Titans. Derrick Henry over 2,000 yards at home. Titans in this game.
Fuji?
As the movie says, remember the Titans. Derrick Henry, a battering ram, can't be shut down. Like I said, Lamar Jackson's been figured out, so I'm sure Mike Vrabel will come up with a nice game plan to contain him and their offense. Titans all the way. Tomorrow, not for the Super Bowl.
No, I feel the same thing too. As much as Chris, my brother and best friend, will probably hate me for it, but I think the Titans pull away from the Ravens. I just don't think the Ravens have it for this post game. Bears against the Saints. I will quickly say that I wish the Bears could pull it off, but Saints might end up doing it. I'll still go with the Bears, and I think it won't be too much of a high-scoring event. I think it'll be a 17-10. But Crystal, Bears, Saints, your choice.
I'm going with the Bears. The Saints have played the last 3 years in the playoff and have exited very quickly, and they just don't play well postseason. I think the Bears have something to prove here. I think they're coming in hungry and ready. And I know it's not everybody's going Saints, but I think the Bears are going to come up with the win on this one.
Okay, Adam?
I've been fading the old guy quarterbacks in most of the games we've talked about to this point, but I do like New Orleans. I think regardless of their postseason past, I think they've got just more pedigree. I like the weapons that they have, so I'm going to lean toward them.
All right. Bill?
Yeah, I do like Drew Brees. I always have. He's a great quarterback. I think he's a proven competitor. Kamara running the ball. Michael Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders gives him some weapons. Their defense seems to do just enough. But I do like the Bears. I want the Bears to win as a Seahawk fan. Allen Robinson, David Montgomery, Khalil Mack, if he can cause a turnover or two in this game, that could be enough to tip this thing. And so I want to see, this is my upset of the weekend, Bears over Saints.
Sherman?
The Chicago Bears are 3-0 in dome games this year. Do I hear 4? And the answer is yes. The Chicago Bears are going to beat the New Orleans Saints. And after the New Orleans Saints lose, they're going to talk about, Alvin Kamara knows 6 touchdowns that he scored against the Vikings, and everybody's going to forget about that. This is my upset special of the week. Chicago in this wacky NFC playoffs. Forget about the chalk in the NFC. Chicago Bears are going to beat the New Orleans Saints.
Wow. Right. Uji?
Saints. I mean, Kamara's unstoppable right now. I mean, Mitch Trubisky is probably one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL, which I think the man's total flat-out garbage. I'm sorry. I got to run. I got to roll with Drew and when the Saints go marching in.
All right. Well, of course, the last one that we're going to be talking about here before we go off air is Adam, with you, of course, the Steelers-Browns. Who's your pick?
I'm going to go the Steelers rather comfortably here. I think I like them in a straight up matchup, just because we saw when these teams were both at full strength early in the season. The Steelers were just clearly outclassed the Browns. Since then, they've lost Odell Beckham. They've lost a lot of their guys to COVID. So I think, between the issues that they're having with the virus and the way that they let the Steelers in this one, I'm not sure how far that'll go, but definitely this week I'm all in on the Steelers.
Okay, Crystal?
I am all in on the Steelers too, and I have a little Browns fan living in my house, but and he's like, I hate you so much that you're picking them, but I'm going with the Steelers. I think they are going to be a much different team this time around, and I think Browns are walking into a bloodbath.
Right. Bill?
A little COVID update for you. Harrison Bryant, Ronnie Harrison, and linebacker Malcolm Smith have been cleared off the COVID list, but Denzel Ward, cornerback, remains on the list. So just thought I'd let you know there. Yeah, on this game, I'm not sure what to make of Pittsburgh, honestly. I would say, to Adam, what's the difference between the first half of the season or the 2/3 of the season and then the way that they played down the stretch? Is it just because they saw better teams, better defenses, teams got them figured out, or they just kind of lost their way a little bit? That would make a difference to me. It's knowing what's going on there.
Yeah, I think defenses have really been creeping up because the Steelers have been relying on that kind of that short passing game, and they haven't been able to throw downfield as much. So I think that's been the biggest issue for me. I think that's something that they can overcome this week. That's why I think I'd tip the scales against the Browns this week, given all their issues and given the way they couldn't defend that short passing game early in the season. But yeah, I share your same questions of whether they can get that downfield passing game going later in the postseason.
I think if I was to make a pick, honestly, it's a toss-up for me. I know that the Browns are visiting. I've been kind of intrigued by the Browns for a couple of years. I thought that they might have been a playoff team a year ago. They kind of put it all together this year. Baker Mayfield is an unknown guy in the playoffs, and I kind of want to see that happen. I love Nick Chubb. He's one of my favorite players at the running back position. It's going to be a close game. I think both teams are going to score some points here. This could be one of those highest scoring games in the playoffs type of thing. So I'm toss up. I don't know.
Sherman?
Go back to the Steelers-Colts game a couple weeks ago and what the Steelers did in desperation, and they found a way to turn up the juice in that game, and they won. I think that Mike Tomlin will find a way for the Pittsburgh Steelers to turn up the juice in the playoffs, and they really get an advantage here going up against a Browns team that's dealing with the COVID pandemic. I think that the Browns will have their time to shine in the future, but unfortunately it is not tonight. I think the Steelers find a way to win this game, just as Adam said, pretty easily. Even though Cleveland is able to run the ball effectively, I'm going with the Steelers here.
Okay, Fuji?
I'm going with the ground and pound Cleveland Browns because Pittsburgh, to me, down the stretch, they just look fraudulent. They just, they lost Bud Dupree. They lost Evan Bush. Pittsburgh just don't look like the team that they have in the past. I think they're not as good as what the record has shown. I mean, they lost a lot of close games, and Like ever since like Washington knocked them off, they just, you just can't come into the playoffs and turn it on. I'm going with Cleveland, even though they got all not by much, but I think the Browns pull the upset.
I'm going to go with you, Fuji. I think the Browns find a way to pull it off. At least I believe. I'm pretty sure tomorrow we might hear a take from Joe from Just Joe. He might end up making the same choice as well, but I think the Browns do find a way to win. So, yeah, I'm going to go with the Browns. But I thank you, of course, Adam, Crystal, Bill, for coming on. We appreciate you guys coming on for the hour. Everyone, we hope they enjoyed the playoff games today. Of course, we'll be back on live again tomorrow at 12 o'clock to break down those 3 games for tomorrow. So we do appreciate everybody making the switch from Facebook over to YouTube. Tom, Joey B, as always, thank you so much. And everyone else that tuned in, we thank you. Please bring the comments, of course, on every show. We do appreciate it. So for Mike Sherman, Mike Fuji, I'm Angel. We will see you guys tomorrow. Other than that, enjoy the rest of the games tonight. See you soon.